Social 20-1, we're looking at source number 2 of World War I. Give you a second or two to study the cartoon, and then we'll get into it. Well, we'll start with the imagery first. So we've got two soldiers. Judging by their helmets, these would be the Allies. So uh, Britain, France, Canada, maybe. You've got a soldier being sent up the ladder. He's got a rifle in one hand, an axe in the other, and then you're left looking at what he's going to have to contend with before he can reach his objective. So he's got barbed wire. We've talked about the dangers of that. Bullets whizzing overhead, dead soldier over to the right. And his leader, maybe a lieutenant, maybe a captain, who knows, saying, "You go first, corporal, and I'll hold the ladder for you." So you're left thinking, big deal, you're going to hold the ladder when I'm the one that's got to go over the top and probably die fighting for my country. Um, so it's a definite critique of World War I, of the reasons for fighting the war, the conditions of the war, and the sacrifice of young men that fought and died in the name of their country to fight that war. And if all of these things don't get the guy going over the top, then maybe the gas will, because these guys are wearing gas masks at the bottom. So he's got to leave the safety of the trench, but the guy giving him the orders gets to stay in the safety of the trench and probably not have to die. It makes me think about the notes we took last week on the myths of war as countries, were entering World War One. Early on in that war, because war had been so romanticized, they were turning people away that were volunteering to fight. They were too young, they weren't fit, they weren't in shape. Well, they were taking those guys later on, and young people who were turned away the first time came back and were allowed to fight later on too. They eventually had to constrict men and force them to fight World War One. So when I look at that cartoon, it makes me think about the myths of war, how it had been romanticized. It was your duty to fight for your country. You were a coward if you didn't. This is for your country. This is what it means to be a true patriot. You get to travel, and don't forget you'll be home by Christmas. How bad can it really be after all? And they get there and they recognize the clash of tactics versus weaponry, and millions of men died needlessly, many of whom didn't even fire a shot upon going over the top of their trench. So the artist, the cartoonist, is making a definite stab at a definite critique of the reasons for fighting World War One, for fighting war in general. Young men were forced to give their lives for someone else's reasons, for someone else's cause. And ironically enough, the people that wanted to fight World War One, leaders, generals, um, prime ministers, and presidents, they didn't have to die in World War One. So to them, war was convenient. This is a war that I can fight to show my country's stature, my country's dominance, but I won't have to pay the price for it. I've got millions of young men that'll pay that price for me while I hide behind and in the trench as they fight and die for my cause. Because when you think about it, this young man probably doesn't even know why he's going over the top to fight for his country. He knows that he's supposed to fight for his country. He probably couldn't tell you why, or even much about his enemy. He's got nothing personally against him. World War One was someone else's war to the common trench soldier, but he was the guy that paid the price for that someone else's war. In terms of links, well, I see foreign policy. I see expansionism alliances. I see the fallout of foreign policy in action, that expansionism, forging an alliance with another country, maybe just plain old nationalism in general. Ultranationalism is expensive. That's what that cartoonist is pointing out. He's pointing out the expense involved with nationalist policies, with really ultranationalist policies, and the expense is human life. Um, that was needless. No real point for it. This guy is definitely challenging nationalism. He might even be rejecting nationalism. He's critiquing it. He's saying, look at what nationalism has come to. Look at what it has led us to. We're sending young men to their deaths, and they don't even know why they're fighting the war. Okay, we'll follow this up tomorrow with source number 3.